Yo, what's going on, guys? Today I will be talking about 2B and how she stacks up today, almost 2 years after release. And by the way, let me know down in the comments if you're an OG 2B haver or if this is your first time experiencing the Nier collab in Nikke. But first, let's get a refresher on her skills, and then we will take a look at the teams and her damage with today's supports. Alright, so here you have skill 1, activates when using burst skill, affect self. So every time she enters a full burst, she gains 1 stack of this, and this doesn't expire for the entire battle. So the first time she bursts, she gets this, the second time she bursts, she gets the 20%, and then the third time she gets the 57, and they are cumulative. So they, like, once you get, for example, the second one, the first one doesn't expire. So at the second proc, you get 30%. At the third one, you get like 87, right? So she increases her max HP by 87% or so from skill 1. Now, the reason that is important is because she, while technically scaling on attack, she really scales on HP more because she converts HP to attack using her skill 2. Right, so here you have, after firing 300 times, affects all enemies, deals a little bit of damage. But then, right here, this is the second condition, which is the most important one, which is the reason why skill 2 is very important for this character, is that when she activates when entering battle, affects self, attack increases by 6.16% of caster's final max HP, which I will put up a screenshot on the screen right now. And after the first proc of the skill 1, she gets 243,000 attack based on her HP during battle. And then when she activates it the third time, she gets around 457,000 attack, which is like 215 or so extra attack going from the first proc to the third one, right? So that's quite a bit of attack. Now this is the reason why she doesn't really scale too well with attack overload lines, because it's just so oversaturated on attack because of the skill 2, right? So that's why we will not be seeing attack in the overload lines recommendations later on. But then third but not least, we got the burst skill, which affects all enemies and deals massive multiplier of 2400% of attack as distributed damage. So she scales on distributed damage as well, and then affects 1 enemy units with the highest remaining HP and deals extra 800% of attack as additional damage. So as you can see by the multiplier itself, this is a nuker character, right? It's a massive one hit during her burst. And so due to the fact that she scales on HP, there hasn't been during her release, and even today, not that many characters that actually buff max HP, which she utilizes the most, right? As we will see in the team section, there isn't really that many specialized buffers, but rather just general buffers for the team. For the teams, these are some of the support characters that I was testing with 2B. So first up we have the Killer Wife. So she's basically the standard, one of the standard B1 units for fire teams, but in this case she was actually outclassed by Rouge because of her being predominantly buffing of HP percentage. Right, so for the most part, I did not use D. I only use D in like 1 or 2 comparisons. So we have Rouge, who buffs HP predominantly, and then we have Crust, who is able to buff distributed damage by manually playing her. Another unit that buffs distributed damage is Masked Maid, as well as Anchor, and the Masked buffs critical damage and critical rate, which is good for 2B. As I stated before, that attack buffs don't really do all that much for 2B. Of course, they benefit her, however, the buff is diluted. And then we have Grave over here, who buffs attack and pierce damage, as well as giving a little bit of max ammo, essentially. And then, of course, I tested the regular one, the general supports like Crown and Naga. And as far as DPSs go, obviously we got 2B, then we got Mihara in some of the comparisons as an off-burst character that you can put in. We got Alice, we got Treasure Drake, Asuka, and we have Ray, right? Ray is especially good for teams where you're using Mihara as an off-burst. You can put in Ray, and she's one of the better supports for Mihara because of that attack buff. However, again, that attack buff does not do all that much for 2B. So now let's take a look at the damage that 2B was able to put down in each of these teams. So first off, we have Rouge, we have 2B and Asuka, with Grave and Naga, and she was doing 430 million damage. And then here we have Asuka doing 522 million, right? And so then we have Grave and Helm. So obviously Helm is a better character for supporting 2B, and as you would expect, because Helm gives 2B a crit rate bonus, as well as, you know, letting them burst more often. We have 85% of Asuka's damage in this team. Then, as you can see here, the Killer Wife, obviously she was not doing as much for 2B. That's why I decided not to continue testing with D, because Rouge was clearly a better choice. And then one of the teams that actually surprised me was this team right here with Crust, and the reason for that is because since Crust released, she really hasn't been able to fit into any team, right? And so I was actually surprised that when I put Crust in this team as a B2, she was actually competitive with the other teams in terms of 2B's numbers. Obviously, Asuka not benefiting from these buffs as much. And so in this team, this is the only team where 2B was able to out-damage Asuka. Right, and you gotta play Crust manually for that distributed damage buff of that Crust is able to provide. Now the second team right here, we got Ray, 2B with Mihara as an off-burst character, with Rouge and Grave. And another thing I want to point out is in each of these teams with Rouge, Rouge is specifically there because she buffs 2B more, right? But a lot of the other DPSs, they do not benefit from Rouge's buffs, right? They do not benefit from max HP. So in a lot of these teams, 2B is the one that's being catered to, and then the other ones are just there, you know, for the ride along. Basically. And so in these teams with Mihara, you can see that with Grave, 2B was able to actually do right around the same damage as Ray, but then when you switch out to Crown, Ray pulls out ahead by quite a bit and 2B falls off. And then this is just an example of you know, the modern units, how they compare to 2B, you know, doing more than 3 times the damage as an off-burst character, you know. So there you have it. Mihara just clears, you know what I mean? So then moving on to these ones right here, these are with Crown Naga, and then using a different DPS just to see how each of these DPSs compares in this team to 2B. And so we can see that 2B is just not hanging with these characters. They're almost doing twice as much damage as 2B in this generalist team, right? Even with Rouge catering to 2B and not to these DPSs. So imagine if you put someone like Leader here, or Little Mermaid even, you know what I mean? that gap would just widen even more. And this is Alice with Grandma strats, right? Basically on auto. I'm not interested in, you know, min-maxing the amount of shots that Alice is putting down. If you take some Adderall, maybe you'll be able to increase this gap even more, you know what I mean? So we got this going, and then we have Maid Mast and Maid Anchor, right, for that distributed damage and that crit buff for 2B with the buff from Rouge as well. So Asuka is really just being neglected in this team, you know what I mean? And then still putting down more damage than 2B. And then we have the Crown, Little Mermaid 2B, Asuka with Helm being right here. Asuka just pulling away from 2B by quite a bit. 2B doing 65% damage of Asuka here, and Little Mermaid doing 691, actually out damaging 2B as a B1 character. So overall, as you can see, is that 2B is just really not hanging there with these other DPSs. Even in teams where the support characters are specifically catered to 2B, is just not able to put down the numbers to keep up. But I gotta say that I'm kind of impressed by how well she was able to keep up over the past 2 years compared to some of these newer units. Obviously Alice is a day 1 unit, but you know, she did better than I thought she would, to be honest. But unfortunately, she's just not fitting in with today's units. But as far as skill investment goes, I'd recommend initially going to 774, prioritizing skill 1 and skill 2, because obviously that big HP increase and that HP to attack convert is very important, and the burst skill scales on attack, so if you don't have enough attack, right, it's not gonna do much damage anyway. Then I'd recommend going for burst skill 7, and then eventually going to 10 10 10. This unit 2B being one of the units that scales well on all of her skills, so it's very expensive to really get out the potential. And then obviously S2 giving a massive attack buff, so you want to prioritize these two, and then finally the burst. And then for the overload lines, you want to go for elemental damage. Obviously attack is not here again because she is very saturated with attack because of that skill 2 combined with skill 1, and so you want to go for crit rate, crit damage, max ammo even for that, so she doesn't have to reload as much. That will increase the overall damage a little bit, but it's not necessary. Alright, so now for my closing thoughts on 2B. So after testing and playing around with her a little bit, I was actually pleasantly surprised because I haven't used this unit in quite a long while. And so before I tested her, I was expecting her to perform much worse than she did. However, I was surprised she was actually keeping up a little bit with the other units. But as you saw in the number section, she just does not have the numbers as these other units have these days. And so would I recommend pulling for 2B? Probably not. She is most likely reserved to that 6th, 7th team, you know what I mean, for like in terms of solo raid and stuff like that. She will most likely not be used because she's outclassed by many other units that have better supports, that don't scale on HP, and are able to be utilized much better than 2B is. But let's not kid ourselves, you are going to pull for her anyway, so good luck with the pulls. And so 2B still remains in that A tier in my opinion. So do with that what you will. Next week we'll review A2 when she releases. And so that's gonna do it for now. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.